The letter showed up on my kitchen counter Tuesday morning. I lived alone, so that was weird enough. But the cream-colored envelope with my name written in fancy script? That made my stomach twist. Hayden James Volkov. That's me. I fix computers for a living in Detroit and haven't thought about God since I was 12. The letter inside had Vatican letterhead. Real Vatican, not some joke shop knockoff. Your name appears on the Secretum Nominum. Report to Cardinal Bellecourt's office within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate excommunication and eternal consequences. I laughed. Had to be my cousin Rico messing with me. He was always pulling stupid pranks, and this seemed like his style. But the paper felt expensive, heavy, the kind of stuff rich people use. I called Rico. He swore he didn't send it. I called my ex-girlfriend Amber. She hung up on me, which was pretty normal. By Thursday, I was standing in Vatican City with a backpack and a lot of questions. The guards checked my passport 3 times. Each one looked at me like I was carrying a bomb instead of just clothes and confusion. Cardinal Bellecourt's office was at the end of a long hallway, lined with paintings of old guys in red hats. The cardinal himself was maybe 50, with gray hair and eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Mr. Volkov," he said, pointing to a chair. "Thank you for coming. I gotta be honest, I have no idea what this is about." He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a thick leather book with metal clasps. The thing looked older than America. "This is the Secretum Nominum, a list of names that do things when people say them out loud." I waited for him to smile or laugh. He didn't. "What kind of things?" "Depends on the name." He opened the book carefully. "Some names call things. Some names send things away. Your name calls things." The room felt smaller. "What things?" "We're not sure." He flipped through pages covered in handwriting. "Your name was added in 1847 by Archbishop Flanagan after what he called a situation of great concern in Ireland." "That's impossible. I was born in 1985. "The name was added, Mr. Volkov, not you." He ran his finger down a page until he found what he wanted. "Here, Hayden James Volkov." When spoken aloud, this name summons what Archbishop Flanagan called the Hungry Pilgrims. I felt like I was in a dream where nothing made sense. The Hungry Pilgrims? According to his notes, they show up looking for food. They stay until someone feeds them or until they give up and leave. This is crazy. Maybe. But 2 days ago, someone said your name during a cooking show on television. He closed the book and stared at me. Within 4 hours, 23 people in 6 different cities reported groups of strangers showing up at their doors asking for food. The air conditioning hummed. I tried to understand what he was telling me, but it kept slipping away. "You're saying when someone says my name, hungry people appear?" "Not regular people, no. People who shouldn't exist according to any normal understanding." He walked to the window and looked out at the square below. "The church has been tracking these incidents for almost 200 years. We know the patterns. What do you want me to do?" He turned back to me, and for the first time he looked worried. "We want you to disappear." The words hung in the air like smoke. Outside, I could hear tourists talking and laughing. Normal people with normal problems. Disappear how? New identity. New city. We have ways of making Hayden James Volkov stop existing officially. You become someone else. Someone whose name doesn't do anything weird. I thought about my apartment in Detroit, my job fixing computers, my Friday night poker games with guys I'd known forever. It wasn't much, but it was mine. What if I say no? Then we make a note that you refuse to cooperate, and we hope nobody with a microphone says your name again. He sat back down. The last person who said no was a woman named Bertie Kowalski in 1962. A radio DJ in Chicago said her name during a contest. We had to relocate an entire city block. I shifted in the leather chair. Everything about this violated everything I thought I knew about the world. Can I think about it? Sure. But while you're thinking, remember that your name is in our book because Archbishop Flanagan saw something in 1847 that scared him enough to create a whole new section of supernatural paperwork. He opened the book and turned it so I could see. His last note says, "God help me for letting them come back." The writing was faded but readable. Below the main entry, someone had added newer notes in different handwriting. Dates, places, short descriptions. The newest one was from 2 days ago. Detroit, Michigan. Subject's name spoken during Food Network broadcast. 23 individuals reported encounters with hungry pilgrims within 4-hour window. Duration, 3 hours, 12 minutes. Resolution, unknown. Resolution unknown? They left on their own after about 3 hours. We don't know why. He closed the book. Which brings us to our second problem. There's more? The time is getting shorter. In 1847, Archbishop Flanagan said the hungry pilgrims stayed for days. In 1962, Bertie Kowalski's incident lasted 10 hours. Your recent incident lasted just over 3 hours. I didn't like where this was going. What does that mean? We think the effect is getting stronger, more concentrated, which means the next time someone says your name. He paused. The results might be much worse. Someone knocked on the door. A young priest came in, whispered something to the cardinal, and left fast. The cardinal's expression changed from professional calm to actual alarm. "Mr. Volkov, we'll have to finish this later." He stood up quick, putting the book back in the drawer. There's been another incident. Another incident? Someone at a restaurant in Phoenix said your name while giving a toast. The hungry pilgrims showed up in the middle of dinner service. He moved toward the door, then stopped. 150 diners, Mr. Volkov, all of them getting asked for food at the same time. The floor felt uneven under my feet. Are they okay? We don't know. It's still happening. He opened the door and waved for me to follow. I think you need to see what your name actually does. We walked fast through hallways I hadn't seen before. Priests and nuns nodded to the cardinal, but avoided looking at me. The building felt bigger inside than it should have been. We ended up in a room full of monitors and phones, like a smaller version of a TV newsroom. Priests and regular people sat at desks, talking into headsets or typing on computers. One wall had a world map with red dots all over it. "This is our monitoring center," the cardinal said. "We track incidents related to registry names in real time." A priest walked up to us with a tablet. "Cardinal, we have reports from Phoenix. The hungry pilgrims number about 60 individuals. They're asking each restaurant customer for food personally." 60? The cardinal took the tablet and scrolled through whatever was on the screen. The biggest previous incident was 15. "Sir, there's something else." The priest hesitated. "They're not speaking English." "What are they speaking?" "We're not sure. Language experts think it might be Old Irish, but the pronunciation is strange." The cardinal handed back the tablet and looked at me. "Mr. Volkov, you need to understand how serious this is. Your name has been said out loud 3 times this week. Each time has been bigger than the last. If this keeps happening..." He didn't finish, but I could see what he meant written on his face. I thought about the restaurant customers in Phoenix, people who'd gone out for a nice dinner, and instead got approached by 60 strangers speaking a dead language and asking for food. What do you need me to do? Right now? Nothing. We handle incidents as they happen. But tomorrow morning I need your answer about the new identity. He pointed at the monitors, where red dots kept blinking. Because if you stay Hayden James Volkov, I don't think we can contain the next incident. A new red dot appeared on the map. Then another. The priest with the tablet looked up from his screen, his face white. "Cardinal, we're getting reports of smaller incidents in places where the Phoenix restaurant was live streaming their event." The cardinal closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked 10 years older. How many places? 14 so far, still growing. I watched red dots multiply on the map. Each one was real people whose lives had just become impossible to understand. People like me, who'd woken up today in a world where names were just names. "I'll take the new identity," I said. The cardinal nodded. "I'll have the papers ready tonight. Tomorrow morning, Hayden James Volkov stops existing, and you become someone whose name doesn't cause cosmic problems. What happens to the people asking for food? They fade away once your old identity gets officially dissolved. Usually takes a few hours after we process the paperwork." The red dots had stopped growing, but 19 locations now showed active incidents. 19 places where people were dealing with something impossible. "Cardinal," I said, staring at the map, "what exactly did Archbishop Flanagan see in 1847? "That's a question you won't need to worry about after tomorrow." He put his hand on my shoulder. "Some knowledge is too dangerous to carry, even for people who never asked for it." But as I left the monitoring center and followed another priest back through the maze of hallways, I couldn't stop thinking about those 60 people in Phoenix, speaking a language that had been dead for centuries and asking strangers for food. What were they so hungry for? And why did Archbishop Flanagan think they needed to come back? The questions followed me to my hotel room, where I sat on the bed and stared at myself in the mirror. Tomorrow morning, the guy looking back would have a different name, a different identity, a different place in whatever cosmic system kept track of these things. But tonight, I was still Hayden James Volkov. And despite everything the cardinal had told me, I still didn't understand what that really meant. I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow I was going to stop being me and become someone else. Someone safe. Someone whose name wouldn't make 60 strangers show up at restaurants speaking dead languages. At 3 in the morning, I gave up and opened my laptop. If this was my last night as Hayden James Volkov, I wanted to know what that name actually meant. The cardinal had mentioned Archbishop Flanagan in Ireland. That was something to start with. The hotel internet was decent. Within an hour, I'd found stuff about Archbishop Timothy Flanagan in old church records. He'd worked in County Cork from 1834 to 1851, during the potato famine. Most of it was boring church paperwork, but one thing stood out. A letter dated September 20th, 1847, from Archbishop Flanagan to someone important at the Vatican. The subject was, "Request for help with supernatural events in Ballydehob Parish." Ballydehob. I'd never heard of it, but a quick search told me it was one of the worst hit areas during the famine. Entire families had starved to death there. The letter was hard to read in the scanned image, but I could make out pieces. Unprecedented gathering of individuals seeking, and begging for sustenance they cannot receive. And at the bottom, I fear I have witnessed something beyond God's plan. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Rome spread out below me, ancient and huge. Somewhere out there, Cardinal Bellecourt was probably awake too, getting ready to erase me from existence. But I kept thinking about Ballydehob in 1847. The famine had killed over 1 million people. Whole towns had been wiped out. What had Archbishop Flanagan seen that scared him into creating supernatural paperwork? My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Cafe Luna on Via del Tritone at 7 a.m. Come alone. Trust me." I stared at the message. Cardinal Bellecourt had my number, but this didn't feel like him. Too mysterious. But who else in Rome even knew I existed? At 6:45 a.m., I was sitting in Cafe Luna with an espresso, wondering if I was being stupid. The place was almost empty, just a few people getting coffee before work. Normal people with normal lives. At exactly 7 a.m., a woman walked up to my table. She looked about 50, with red hair going gray, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing things other people don't. When she spoke, her accent was Irish. "Hayden Volkov?" I nodded. "My name is Dr. Fiona Murphy. I teach history at University College Cork, and I've been studying Archbishop Flanagan's work for 20 years. She sat down without asking. I know about the secretum nominum. How? Because 15 years ago, someone said my brother's name during a podcast about Irish history. She waved at the waiter for coffee. Cormac Brendan Murphy. His name was added to the book in 1848, the year after yours. The cafe felt too small for this conversation. What happened to your brother? He took the Vatican's deal. New identity, new life. Became Brian Collins, moved to Australia, worked on a ranch. Her coffee came and she added sugar. He died 3 years ago, never knowing why his name had power. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be angry. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Do you know what Archbishop Flanagan really saw in Ballydehob? I shook my head. Mass graves, hundreds of them. Families who died of starvation, buried without proper ceremonies because there weren't enough priests for all the dying. She drank her coffee, never looking away from me. But some of those families weren't completely dead. My espresso tasted bitter. What do you mean? Famine fever. People would collapse from hunger and disease, appear dead for hours or even days, then wake up. She pulled a folder from her bag. But by the time they woke up, they'd already been buried. The room spun a little. They were buried alive, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The living dead of the Great Hunger. She opened the folder and showed me photocopies of old documents. Archbishop Flanagan's private journal, which the Vatican doesn't know I have copies of. He describes finding people clawing their way out of mass graves, still wearing their burial clothes, begging for food. I looked at the photocopies. The handwriting was shaky, like someone had written it while their hands were trembling. Day 12 of the manifestation. They continue to emerge from the consecrated ground, seeking sustenance for bodies that should not require it. I have counted 47 individuals, all bearing the appearance of death, yet moving with purpose. They speak names I do not recognize, names that seem to carry weight beyond their meaning. Names that carry weight beyond their meaning, I repeated. The names of the people who were supposed to help them. The names of relatives in America who were sending money that never arrived. The names of landlords who could have prevented their starvation. Dr. Murphy flipped through more pages. Your name, Hayden James Volkoff, belonged to a grain merchant from Liverpool who was supposed to deliver emergency supplies to Ballydehob. My hands felt cold. What happened to him? He kept the grain and sold it somewhere else for more money. The shipment that was supposed to feed 300 families never arrived. She showed me another document. 47 people died waiting for that grain. They were buried in a mass grave on September 18th, 1847. 2 days before Archbishop Flanagan wrote his letter to the Vatican. Exactly, because on September 19th they started digging their way out. She closed the folder. The church has been covering this up for almost 200 years. Every name in that book belongs to someone who failed the hungry dead of the Great Famine. I felt sick. So when someone says my name, you call them back. The hungry pilgrims. They're looking for the food they never received, from people who carry the names of those who failed them. She leaned back in her chair. And each time they're summoned, they get hungrier, more desperate. The cardinal said the incidents are getting shorter, but more intense. Because they're running out of time. Dr. Murphy's voice dropped to almost a whisper. According to Flanagan's journal, they can only return for a limited period. After that, they fade permanently. But before they go, they're going to try one last time to get what they need. Which is what? Not food, Hayden. Justice. She stood up and put money on the table for her coffee. The Vatican wants you to disappear because they know what's coming. The next time someone says your name, those 47 people aren't going to politely ask strangers for food. They're going to demand it from the person whose name represents their betrayal. From me. From you. She picked up her folder. The question is, are you going to let the church erase you to cover up their failure? Or are you going to do what Hayden James Volkov should have done in 1847? She walked away before I could answer, leaving me alone with my cold espresso and a decision that would define whatever came next. I sat there for another hour, thinking about 47 people who'd died waiting for food that never came. People who'd been buried alive and then forgotten, their suffering turned into a Vatican secret to be managed and contained. At 9 a.m., I was back at Cardinal Bellecourt's office. He looked up from his desk with relief when I walked in. Mr. Volkov, excellent. I have your new identity papers ready. You'll be Nathan Parker from Portland, Oregon. We've prepared a complete background, including employment history and credit records. I'm not taking the new identity. His face went pale. I beg your pardon? I said no. I'm staying Hayden James Volkov. I sat down in the same chair I'd occupied yesterday. And I want you to tell me everything about the hungry pilgrims. Mr. Volkov, you don't understand the dangers. I understand that 47 people died because the real Hayden James Volkov chose profit over human lives. I understand that they've been trying to come back for almost 200 years to get justice. I leaned forward. And I understand that the Catholic Church has been covering it up this whole time. Cardinal Bellecourt was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out the leather book again. How much do you know? Enough. Dr. Fiona Murphy filled in the gaps your people left out. He sighed and opened the book to my entry. Dr. Murphy has been a problem for us for quite some time. Her research threatens the stability of our containment protocols. Your containment protocols are built on letting injustice go unpunished. They're built on preventing the return of entities that could destabilize the natural order. He turned the book so I could see the full entry. Do you see these notations? Each time your name has been spoken, the incidents have grown larger and more aggressive. The next incident won't be hungry pilgrims politely asking for food. It will be 47 accusers demanding justice from someone who bears the name of their betrayer. Good. Good? He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Mr. Volkov, if someone speaks your name publicly again, those entities will manifest wherever you are. They will not leave until they receive satisfaction for the wrong done to them in 1847. Then I'll give them satisfaction. How? You cannot provide food to people who died of starvation almost 200 years ago. You cannot undo the actions of a grain merchant whose greed killed 47 innocent people. All you can do is become the target of their accumulated rage and desperation. I thought about the wedding in Baltimore, the restaurant in Phoenix, all those normal people who'd been confronted with something impossible because of a name I'd carried my whole life without knowing its weight. Maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Cardinal Bellecourt closed the book and put it back in the drawer. I cannot allow you to leave here if you refuse our protection. You can't keep me here either. Actually, we can. The Vatican is a sovereign nation, Mr. Volkov. We have our own laws and our own methods of enforcement. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to save you, and everyone else who might be affected by your decision. He picked up his phone. I'm going to have you escorted to secure accommodations while we discuss this further. Wait. I held up my hand. What if there was another way? He paused with the phone halfway to his ear. What do you mean? What if instead of running from this, we faced it directly? What if we gave the hungry pilgrims what they actually want? Which is what? Acknowledgement. Recognition that a wrong was done. An apology from someone carrying the name of the person who failed them. I stood up. What if we called them intentionally, in a controlled setting, and gave them the justice they've been seeking? Cardinal Bellecourt put down the phone. That's incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than having them show up randomly every time someone mentions my name on television? He was quiet for several minutes, thinking. Finally, he opened his desk drawer again and pulled out a different book, smaller than the first one. "There are protocols," he said slowly. "Procedures for what the church calls voluntary manifestation. We've used them only twice in the past century. What happens? We create a controlled environment, speak the name intentionally, allow the entities to manifest fully and present their case." He opened the smaller book and flipped through pages covered in careful handwriting. "If they receive satisfaction, they fade permanently. If they don't, they remain active indefinitely, manifesting whenever their trigger name is spoken, growing stronger and more aggressive with each incident." I thought about Dr. Murphy's brother, who died in Australia, never knowing why his name had power. About all the other people whose names were in that leather book, people who'd been erased and relocated to contain secrets they'd never asked to carry. I want to try it. The risks of not trying are worse. I sat back down. How many more people are going to have their lives destroyed by incidents they can't understand? How many more names are you going to have to erase? Cardinal Bellecourt stared at the smaller book for a long time. When he looked up, his expression had changed from fear to something that might have been respect. "Very well, Mr. Volkov. We'll attempt a voluntary manifestation." He closed the book. "But it happens here, in a consecrated space with full church supervision." "When?" "Tonight. After dark, when the square is empty." He stood up. "I suggest you spend the day preparing yourself mentally. What you're about to face has been waiting almost 200 years for justice." "Good," I said again. But as I left his office and walked back through those long hallways lined with portraits of serious men in red hats, I wondered if I was brave or just incredibly stupid. Either way, tonight I was going to meet the 47 people who died, because the original Hayden James Volkov chose money over human lives, and I was going to give them the apology they deserved. At midnight, I stood in the center of St. Peter's Basilica. The massive church was empty except for me, Cardinal Bellecourt, and 6 other priests arranged in a circle around the altar. Candles provided the only light, casting long shapes across the marble floor. "Are you ready, Mr. Volkov?" the cardinal asked. I nodded, though ready wasn't the right word. You can't really be ready to face the consequences of someone else's greed from 2 centuries ago. "Remember," he said, "speak clearly and directly. Acknowledge the wrong that was done. Express genuine remorse. If they accept your apology on behalf of the name you carry, they'll find peace. And if they don't, then God help us all." Cardinal Bellecourt opened his prayer book and began reading in Latin. The other priests joined in, their voices echoing off the dome above us. The words were old and powerful, creating a kind of sacred space within the already holy building. When the prayers ended, the cardinal looked at me. "It's time." I took a deep breath and spoke clearly into the silence. "My name is Hayden James Volkov." Nothing happened for several seconds. Then the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. The candle flames flickered but didn't go out, and 47 people materialized in the basilica. They stood in ragged clothes, thin and pale, with earth still clinging to their burial shrouds. Men, women, children. Some looked like they'd been dead for days. Others appeared almost alive except for their eyes, which held a kind of emptiness that made my stomach turn. But they weren't threatening. They just looked tired. Incredibly, deeply tired. An older man stepped forward. He was maybe 60, with gray hair and hands that had known hard work. When he spoke, his voice carried the accent Dr. Murphy had described. Old Irish, but clear enough to understand. "You bear the name of the one who failed us." "Yes," I said. "Do you know what your name cost?" 47 lives. "I know." The man nodded slowly. "My daughter Bridget was 6 years old. She asked me every day when the grain ship would come. I told her soon. I told her to be patient. His voice cracked. She died in my arms, still asking about the food that never came. Behind him, a young woman held a baby that couldn't have been more than a year old. Both of them looked at me with the same exhausted patience. We waited, she said. We watched the harbor every day for ships that never arrived. We trusted that help was coming. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it completely. I'm so sorry for what happened to you, for what the man whose name I carry did to you. Sorry doesn't fill empty bellies, said another voice. A teenage boy, thin as a rail, stepped closer. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead. No, I agreed. It doesn't. Nothing I can say or do will undo what happened to you. But I can acknowledge it. I can say that what was done to you was wrong, that you deserved better, that you mattered. The boy stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. We've been waiting so long just to hear someone say that, the older man said. To have someone admit that we existed, that our deaths meant something. They did mean something. Your lives meant something. I looked around at all 47 faces. The world should remember what happened to you. The church should remember. I'll remember. One by one, they began to smile. Not happy smiles, but peaceful ones. The kind of expression people get when a long burden finally lifts. Will you tell our story? Asked the woman with the baby. Yes, I promise. Will you make sure it doesn't happen to others? I'll try. The older man walked up to me and extended his hand. I shook it, surprised by how solid and warm it felt. Thank you, Hayden James Volkov, for coming when we called, for listening, for caring about people you never met. Thank you for waiting so long for justice. We can rest now, he said. One by one, they began to fade, not violently or dramatically, just gently dissolving like morning mist. The young woman was last to go. She looked directly at me as she disappeared. The name is yours now, she said. Use it well. Then they were gone, and I was alone with the cardinal and the other priests in the flickering candle light. It's finished, Cardinal Bellecourt said quietly. They found peace. I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in days. What happens now? Now? You go home. You live your life as Hayden James Volkov, knowing that your name no longer carries supernatural weight. He closed his prayer book. And perhaps if you're willing, you help us identify others whose names might carry similar burdens. There are more, many more, people living normal lives, carrying names that connect them to old injustices they know nothing about. He gestured toward the altar where the 47 had stood. Tonight proved that acknowledgement and genuine remorse can heal wounds that have festered for generations. I'll help, I said without hesitation. 3 months later, I was back in Detroit, fixing computers and living a perfectly normal life. But twice a week, I got on video calls with Dr. Fiona Murphy and other researchers around the world. We were building a database of names from the Secretum Nominum, tracking down their historical origins, finding the living people who carried them. Some took the Vatican's offer of new identities, but others chose to face their names' histories directly, working with the church to provide closure for the supernatural entities attached to them. It wasn't easy work. Some names carried much darker histories than mine. Some entities weren't interested in apologies, but for those willing to confront the past honestly, there was always a path to resolution. My name was Hayden James Volkov. It had belonged to a grain merchant who chose profit over human lives in 1847. For almost 200 years, that choice had created supernatural consequences that affected innocent people around the world. But now it was just my name again. I'd earned the right to carry it by doing what the original Hayden James Volkov should have done, acknowledging the suffering his greed had caused and treating the victims with the dignity they deserved. Sometimes the hardest thing about inheriting someone else's mistakes is finding the courage to make them right. But when you do, both the living and the dead can finally find peace. The Vatican still keeps its list of names not meant to be spoken. But now, instead of just hiding from the consequences, we're facing them head on, one name at a time.